Welcome to the Innovators Club for Women webinar channel, where innovation meets inspiration. I am the CEO and founder, Katie Cupstis. Jeff, I've known for, oh my gosh, more than 30 years.
Yeah.
We go way back, and it's great to see his face, and it's even better to know that, he's a successful exited founder, worked really hard. He was always the tech guy in high school, and we all should have followed his lead because, look where he is now. Um, but, really grateful for this opportunity, specifically for my community, to have the opportunity to hear what you have to say, and a little bit about your journey. So just the first question, how did the acquisition process start for your company, and what were the main steps involved? And, you can just give us a brief overview for some of these. It doesn't have to be super specific, as specific as
Sure.
you can be.
Yeah, I'm an open book on most of this stuff. Because honestly, one of the reasons I like doing this, and I'll actually be in Drexel in a couple of weeks talking to the entrepreneurship class. I wish there was more of this for me when I was
Yeah,
growing up and just kind of navigating the journey. There's a lot of like the glamorization of the exit, or like the success and all the money and the fame and the fortune and all of, and there's a piece of that that comes with it. But
right.
there's also like the grit and the grind, and which I think is beautiful. Like, to me, that's the
Mhm.
beautiful part about it. So to kind of lead up to that in a very quick way, Forge 3 really was founded back in 2004. I didn't exit until July of 2022. So this was 18 months and two, or I'm sorry, 18 years and 2 months. I used to know the number of days. It's like 6,628 days or something like that. So it took a long time. And really, things didn't take off until year 12 or something like that. We created a platform, a website platform for insurance agencies called Active Agency. And then things took off, right? But the first 12 years were a grind, and I couldn't figure anything out. I failed. Everything I touched basically turned to not gold. Everything failed. And then to answer your question, though, after 18 years, especially at the latter part of it, as we got more traction and more accolades and a reputation in the industry and all of that, you inherently have people reaching out almost constantly. And they're either like venture capital people, they're private equity people, you usually know, like, we were in the insurance industry, so we knew the players, we knew other competitors, we knew complementary companies to ours. So these, you see them at trade shows and conferences, and you're on stage and you're meeting with them and you're doing all this stuff. So the conversations kind of naturally happen. And ultimately, there were a number of conversations, and some of them got more serious. And I really wasn't looking to sell, quite honestly. I sold for a couple of different reasons, which we can get into if you're interested.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it was like, let's have some conversations. And there were kind of got whittled down to three, offers that I was three paths that I was considering, and ultimately chose one, a company called FMG, and they have a sub brand called Agency Revolution, and that's their insurance arm. They have a financial advisor arm and an insurance arm. Forge 3 got put under their insurance arm, and that's basically how it happened. So it was kind of organic. It wasn't really a forced thing. There wasn't. Sometimes you can run a process, they call it, where you want to sell, but you want to have a broker or somebody in the middle broker the deal and get a bunch of bids and all that kind of stuff. I already knew who I thought the best players would in the best place for the company would be. So I really didn't go through that process. It was pretty natural process.
Okay, awesome. Great. So another quick question, you had said originally that you did not necessarily intend on selling. So just after speaking to actually this week specifically a lot of venture capitalists, the feedback from them in general is if you don't have an exit strategy, they aren't necessarily as willing to, um, invest in you. So what was your experience with that? Like, it sounds like you had a lot reaching out to you, which is not necessarily always the situation.
Right. So keep in mind that Forge 3 was bootstrapped too. So there was
Right.
no funding, there were no other investors. I owned 100% of the company.
Yeah.
And So as a result of that, there wasn't this pressure. There was no any kind of money that you take on, there's going to be strings attached to it. They might be
Right.
big strings, little strings, but there's going to be a string, and you have to, play that game and navigate it a little bit. So sure, if we were going to get investing in an investment, and I have companies coming to me now saying, hey, can you invest in us?
Sure.
Of course, like I'm thinking, well, how do I get my money back, right? Like if you
Mhm.
don't have some plan, then
Right.
what's the point here?
Right.
So it was a little bit different in my case because it was bootstrapped. I didn't have to really report to anybody. There wasn't some board of directors calling the shots and saying, go faster, go bigger, go whatever, and we need to 10x our money and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We didn't
Yeah.
have to do it,
Yeah.
so
And
it was
that's, yeah.
different.
That's really key. So thank you for explaining that because I know that's a question that comes up all the time.
Yeah.
So, you did cover some of this. What were the key things you thought about before deciding to sell your company? If there is anything specific that comes to mind that you want to touch on.
Yeah. So I think, when when people consider if you're in the fortunate position to having something valuable enough where somebody else wants to pay something for it, right, or give you something for it, that's kind of a luxurious position to be in. And like, kudos to you for, for doing that. And, I think every situation is obviously unique, and I think mine is unique as well. I wanted, again, after 18 years and 2 months of doing it, um, I wanted to reset. I wanted to, I didn't want a full-time nanny raising our kids. I wanted to just be present. I wanted to be focused on the family. Every family has their struggles. We're no different than that. I was like, all right, the only thing I really didn't try yet is just to, basically offload this quote unquote distraction, and focus in on what's most important in life, and just kind of reset. So the stars kind of lined up with that. So that was a big piece of it, which is why,
Yeah.
when the acquiring company said, would like you to stay on and run this big division now, so run the piece that you're doing now, but then combine it with ours, and then you can, be the lead of that whole thing. I was like, well, that's the opposite of why I'm selling. I'm not selling to be busier and to get more work and more responsibility. I want the opposite. I want to exit stage left like tomorrow,
Right.
and do this other thing. So that was one of the reasons. And then there are a couple other pieces to it. And I shared this with the team very transparently. I remember when the acquisition day happened. I said that was the primary reason. I said, and also, I want to make sure that there's more opportunities and bigger opportunities for all of you guys that are here, and our clients, right? So we
Yeah.
were navigating this thing where we were contemplating building additional products and services, and yeah, we're like, should we do that? That's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a risk. I think we can do it. We have to invest in it. So we were at this kind of transition point. And so all those stars kind of lined up, and it just kind of felt like the gut check moment said, yeah, you know what? This seems like it's the right time to do it. And we did it. I did it.
Yeah. And I know, just seeing your social media posts over the years, you're definitely, I mean, a great team leader. That shows through. I mean, I know you as a person, you're an amazing guy. But what are some of the specifics that helped you keep your team motivated, especially during the acquisition process and actually getting the flu, right? The day that you had to sign
Yeah,
all
that
the
sucked.
paperwork.
Oh man, that wasn't how I drew it up in my dreams. That's for sure. Um, yeah. Um, so it's kind of tricky, right? Because again, it's not like we were positioning the company for sale. And a lot of tech startups, I think, get people on board through stock and options, and there's like this promise of you have stock, and then we're going to cash out, and we're going to do this thing, and just wait for that moment and all that kind of stuff. Again, because the company was bootstrapped, it was a little bit different than that, right? So,
Yeah,
I always kind of took the approach of let's just run the company and build the company the right way. And then, that's a sustainable model. We can make plenty of money, and then we'll invest that back in the team, which ultimately we did.
yeah,
So there wasn't this like pressure to have some sort of exit or have some sort of thing going on. So, honestly, other than a few core people kind of in my leadership team, nobody even was aware of what was going on, by design, and kind of by
yeah,
request, right? It's like
yeah,
I don't know where this is going to go. We're kind of evaluating it. You have to go through due diligence, and there's a process, and you got to go through this whole thing, and you don't want to upset the apple cart, and you certainly don't want to instill fear in people because you don't have all the answers yet.
Right.
So there's this balancing act, right? So,
Right.
um, but ultimately the transition was a pretty seamless one as far as, the acquiring company came in that day that I was super sick. Um, and came in and they kind of explained, why they were interested. And I explained why I thought it was a good fit and the motivations like we talked about. And life goes on. Obviously there's a lot of transition that happens and there's a lot of
Yeah.
change, and that's can be awkward for a lot of people, but you navigate that, and you kind of get through that.
Yeah. Yeah. So on to the next. What was your approach to raising money when you did, or,
Did
when you
it.
had to?
Yep.
And how did you make sure the company was attractive to buyers? So you didn't actually have to raise the money. They just came in and said, okay, we'd like to do this. And can you just touch a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so it wasn't we didn't need money. The
Yeah.
business, actually, I'm proud of this. The business was profitable since day one, 18 years, 2 months prior, from day one, every single month. We never had a down month. Um, and the profit margins and the way the business was operated was very healthy. So we were in this really nice position of doing what we needed to do as a team, investing what we needed to do as a team, and also investing in the product in an organic way. So there was never this pressure to like, oh, geez, we're going to have a runway and it's going to run out in 3 months and we really need some money in the door. And we didn't have that.
Yeah.
And I think if I'm playing psychologist a little bit on myself, I think it's because I had so many things fail. It's like basically everything in my life up until a certain point fell apart. I couldn't figure out how to make business work. And then all of a sudden you start to get some traction. You're like, all right, I don't want, I want to have a little thing set aside over here because what if this doesn't work too? I'm used to that
Mm-hmm.
happening. Right. So there was no need to raise money. Of course, with the sale of the company, there's a transaction that happens. So, but that wasn't a raise. It wasn't funding the company. It was a pure acquisition.
Right.
The acquiring company wanted Forge 3. So they
Yeah.
paid for it and they got it.
Nice. That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. Um, and I'm sure you use legal strategies. Did you incorporate IP at all to increase your company's value before you sold?
Yeah, a little bit. Software is tricky. We certainly had some. There's the
Yeah.
typical copyright and trademarks and that sort of thing. And there's a certain element of value to those, without a doubt. I think there's more value for other companies than there would be for some other companies, right? It kind of depends on what you're doing and
Yeah.
what the product or services that you're doing. So we did have some of that, but it was a matter of building and just running it. We kind of caught this wave and we just had to ride it. It was kind of this, I don't say it was unexpected, but again, you have to remember for the first 12 years or whatever, me trying stuff, I was paddling out with my surfboard, but every wave was a crappy wave and I wasn't able to stand up on my board, right? And then
Yeah.
eventually you're like, oh, where'd this wave come? And then then you're riding it. So then you're trying to go as fast as you can and not fall off and build stuff and really focus on execution, which is what we did really well, I think, and built a great reputation, incredible reputation in the industry with clients and partners and all that kind of stuff. And that's where the value of the business primarily was in our client base, our reputation, our product, our team, our processes, our workflows, how we operate as a company.
Yeah.
I used to say when we interviewed people, even though we were a relatively small company, we ran the company more like a Starbucks versus a Katie's coffee shop,
Yeah.
right? There's a very different mindset that goes into that. There's not a right or wrong way. Both can be great businesses, but we were under the kind of the assumption of if we're going to do this, we have to make sure that we do this and build the right machine instead of just winging it constantly. So we did a really good job with that. And there's value, right, in all of that stuff that I just mentioned.
100%. Yeah. It's really running it as a full scale operation, like like you said, like a Starbucks, rather than
Mhm.
just a small business. You already had that large mindset before anything else. And I think that's really key. But I also know just from seeing your social media posts and knowing who you are, having that personal connection with customers and making your customer and the people on your team feel like they matter also, I'm sure helped.
Yeah, absolutely it did. Yeah, there was a little bit of early days, it was my personal connections in the space.
Right,
And even before me, it was my dad. So my dad, grew up in the insurance industry, worked at a big insurance company called Chubb for 30 some years. And so I worked at Chubb for a handful of years out of college. And then I went to work for a small software company. Then I created a mobile scavenger hunt game that played with cell phone cameras that Microsoft ended up using. And that's kind of put me onto this entrepreneurial path. But I had these connections from the insurance space that I was able to tap into. So initially it was like, I mean, for the first how many years, it was like Jeff, right? It's like the personal brand of Jeff. Oh yeah, it's Forge 3, but it's like just talk to Jeff was kind of the thing.
right,
Then over time, you can scale that to a certain extent. I always looked at it as like a talk show host. So even on our webinars or at conferences, keynotes, and being on stage and that kind of stuff, there was kind of the consistency of me being the quote unquote host of the show. But as we got bigger, I was able to, I don't want the spotlight just to be on me. It's not just me, right? There's a bunch of people. So then as the host of the show, you bring in other people and you start sharing it, right? Sharing the spotlight. And those people can be people on the team. They can be your partners. They can be your clients, whatever. And then, but you're kind of like the consistent host. And I think for us, especially for a small company in a growth stage, I think that's a really nice way of looking at it because you want some sort of consistency, which is where the trust gets built up. And then ultimately, when you show up like that and people start to like what you're doing, or like the likability factor can come across if you're likable, hopefully you are. And then that builds trust over time. And that
absolutely.
trust turns into business and
Right, right,
things build from
right.
there, right?
Right. So it's really almost like operating a small business, but on a larger scale, giving people that feel good feeling and making them feel important and making sure your team members also feel important. That is really going to, grow the company as a whole. I think that's really key. After attending this conference this week, this AI for Good conference, and we were rubbing shoulder to shoulder with these tech CEOs out of Silicon Valley. That was one of the big takeaways. It's about running your business like a smaller business so that people feel good about working with you and making sure that your customer, whoever that customer is, feels really good in general. And that also means your team as well, because being a great leader, means that you're going to care about the people that work for you. So,
Yeah, for sure.
um,
There are a couple really quick things there, which I think are important. Because I have a lot of time now to reflect back on, and that's what this what's
yeah,
next Jeff.com
yeah,
site is. It's like me trying to organize my own thoughts and like put them out there. So I think about this stuff, quite a bit now that the dust has settled, because it's been over 2 years since the acquisition happened. And there's a couple of things. So sometimes people say fake it until you make it. I don't know if I subscribe to that. Actually, I know that I don't. I think the
right.
vulnerability and saying, you know what, I don't know all the answers, but this is who we are right now, and we're hungry. We want to help you. We want to do whatever, and this is who we are. I think
Yes.
that's very helpful, and it builds a really good culture. The other thing you touched on culture a little bit. The other thing I would say for people watching or listening is that you improve whatever you focus on, right? Or whatever you report on or capture or whatever. So there was this little anecdote that I'll share where we had annual team meetings and I used to prepare this agenda and it turned into like 30 some pages usually. And every year we would take all of the feedback that we got. So whether it was Google or just email or what 5-star reviews or 10 out of 10s or whatever the things were, would capture all of it and I'd put it into this thing. And it would take up out of this 30 some page document, it sometimes took up like 10 pages, right? And we would literally spend an hour plus, sometimes 2 hours, just reading it as a group. We would just sit there and, okay, all right, everyone, it's after lunch. Now we're going to read for the next 2 hours. And we read every single piece of feedback because it was incredible feedback. We didn't filter it, we didn't do anything. And I think that that's just a good example of people didn't like that because it was like, oh, we understand, like we're great, okay, but like when you read it, you reinforce it, and then people focus on it. And then as you go throughout the year, we put it in the Slack channel, a little kudos channel that we had.
Yeah. For more information and to watch our webinars in full, visit our website, innovatorsclubforwomen.org, and join as a member to build your startup for full success.